1605. Beneath the Tower of London. Guy Fawkes shuffles through a narrow stone corridor, his wrists already raw from iron shackles. He believes he's being taken to his cell after his arrest for the gunpowder plot. The guards haven't spoken a word during the descent downstairs that seemed to go deeper than any foundation should allow. They stop at a door he didn't know existed. The chamber beyond defies imagination. A room carved from living rock, its walls slick with centuries of dampness and something darker. Iron devices gleam in the torchlight, wheels, screws and contraptions, whose purposes become sickeningly clear as his eyes adjust to the darkness. This isn't the Tower of London you've seen in tourist brochures. This is the England they never wanted you to discover. A shadow kingdom where official denials meant nothing, where legal protections vanished behind walls thick enough to muffle any sound, and where the Crown's enemies simply disappeared into chambers that officially didn't exist. You know the tower's public history, but what about the levels beneath it that never made it onto any map? The rooms discovered centuries later with scratch marks still visible on the walls, and devices so horrifying that historians initially refused to believe they were real. Stay until the end to learn about the chamber so secret that its very existence was debated for 400 years, until construction workers in the 1960s broke through a wall and found something that changed our understanding of medieval justice forever. Every English schoolchild learns torture was illegal in medieval England. Unlike continental Europe, where judicial torture was routine, English common law explicitly prohibited forcing confessions through physical coercion. The Magna Carta itself declared that justice couldn't be bought, sold, or extracted through pain. But from the beginning of time until now, we know this: kings and queens find ways around inconvenient laws. Torture required a royal warrant, a document signed by the monarch personally authorizing enhanced interrogation for matters of national security. These warrants were rarely issued, and more importantly, rarely preserved in official records. What happened in chambers beneath royal properties fell into a legal grey area, where common law simply didn't apply. The Tower of London became the epicenter of this shadow justice system. Its public function as a royal residence and ceremonial prison provided perfect cover for activities that took place in levels most visitors never saw. The tower's layout, with its maze of interconnected buildings and underground passages, made it possible to move prisoners between official cells and unofficial chambers without detection. But even the tower's notorious reputation couldn't prepare visitors for what lay hidden in its deepest levels, chambers that turned psychological warfare into an exact science. Descending into the Tower of London's lower levels is like traveling backward through time and downward through the layers of English civilization. The public areas above, with their crown jewels and ceremonial guards, give way to increasingly primitive stonework and increasingly sinister architecture. The Salt Tower, one of the tower's lesser-known structures, contained chambers that revealed their purpose through architectural details most visitors would never notice. The walls were designed with slight inward slopes that created acoustic properties, amplifying sounds in specific directions while muffling them in others. Prisoners held here would hear every sound made by other captives, while remaining uncertain whether their own voices carried beyond their cells. But it was the discovery of Little E's that truly revealed the psychological sophistication of English torture methods. This chamber, measuring approximately 4 feet in each direction, was designed with mathematical precision to prevent human occupancy in any comfortable position. A person confined here couldn't stand fully upright, couldn't lie down completely, and couldn't sit without their knees pressed against their chest. The genius of Little E's lay not in its immediate physical effects, but in its cumulative psychological impact. Prisoners held here for weeks or months developed a form of madness that contemporary records describe as the bending sickness, a condition where victims became physically incapable of standing upright even after release, their bodies permanently curved from prolonged confinement. John Gerard, a Jesuit priest captured during Elizabeth I's persecution of Catholics, spent months in Little E's before being transferred to the rack. His own account, smuggled out of the tower and published years later, describes the cell's effects with clinical precision. The space was so constructed that I could neither stand nor sit nor lie at full length, but was compelled to squat upon my heels, which in a short time became exceedingly painful. Gerard's experience reveals another aspect of the tower's hidden chambers. They were designed to work in sequence, each space serving a specific purpose in breaking prisoners' resistance. Little ease softened victims for interrogation, the rack extracted information, and recovery chambers allowed prisoners to heal just enough to endure the process again. The White Tower's dungeons, built into the foundation of the Norman keep, represented the oldest layer of this system. Archaeological excavations have revealed chambers that predate the tower's official construction, suggesting that torture facilities were among the first structures built on the site. These rooms, carved directly from bedrock, showed evidence of continuous use over centuries. Walls polished smooth by countless bodies, floors worn into grooves by pacing prisoners, and drainage systems that revealed their purpose through chemical analysis of residual deposits. Perhaps most disturbing were the chambers designed for specific types of prisoners. Women accused of witchcraft or adultery were held in cells designed to maximize cold and dampness, based on medieval beliefs about female physiology. Foreign agents were confined in spaces that played on cultural claustrophobia, cramped quarters that felt like burial chambers to people accustomed to open spaces. The tower's torture chambers reached their most sophisticated development during the reign of the Tudors, who understood that information extraction required not just physical pressure, but psychological manipulation. Cells were designed with features that seemed merciful, small windows that provided just enough light to maintain hope, or benches that offered momentary comfort before revealing hidden spikes or restraints. These techniques were refined and exported throughout the realm, but what England's castle builders created in their underground chambers made the tower look like a practice facility. The Tower of London was merely the flagship of a network of torture facilities that extended throughout medieval England. Royal castles, manor houses, and ecclesiastical buildings contained spaces that served the crown's need for interrogation and elimination, while maintaining plausible deniability about their activities. Warwick Castle, built on a rocky outcrop that provided natural defensive advantages, also offered perfect conditions for underground chambers that could operate without detection. Excavations in the 19th century revealed a complex system of interconnected rooms beneath the castle's Great Hall, accessible through passages so narrow that prisoners had to be dragged through them on sleds. These chambers showed evidence of sophisticated ventilation systems that allowed interrogators to control airflow, temperature, and humidity with precision. The psychological impact was carefully calculated. Prisoners could be subjected to stifling heat that made breathing difficult, or bone-deep cold that induced hypothermia within hours. The chamber's designers understood that environmental control could break resistance more effectively than any physical device. Chillingham Castle in Northumberland became legendary for its torture chamber, discovered in the 18th century behind a false wall that had hidden its existence for generations. The room contained devices that revealed the evolution of English torture techniques over centuries of use. Early implements showed crude workmanship, while later additions demonstrated sophisticated understanding of human anatomy and psychology. The castle's most notorious feature was a series of drop pits, chambers accessed through trapdoors in the floor above. Prisoners could be dropped into these spaces without warning, and some pits contained spikes designed to wound rather than kill, ensuring that victims would survive long enough for questioning. But perhaps most chilling were the chambers designed for disposal, rather than interrogation. These rooms, found beneath castles throughout England, contained features that revealed their purpose. Channels carved into floors that led to underground streams, furnaces large enough to consume human remains, and acid baths that could dissolve evidence completely. Lancaster Castle's underground chambers, discovered during renovations in the 1960s, contained what archaeologists called the silent rooms, spaces designed with acoustic properties that prevented any sound from escaping. Prisoners held here could scream without being heard by anyone beyond the chamber walls, allowing interrogations to proceed without alerting other captives or castle inhabitants to what was occurring. Walls were covered with lime plaster that made accurate perception of space impossible. Prisoners became unable to judge distances, time, or even their own position within the chamber, creating a form of sensory deprivation that could induce hallucinations and break resistance without physical torture. Yet all of these elaborate deceptions served a single, terrifying purpose, one that reveals the true psychology behind England's hidden reign of terror. Medieval England's torture chambers weren't just hidden, they were powerful because they were hidden. Their true function wasn't to extract truth, it was to instill fear, while preserving the illusion of civilized rule. The Crown denied torture publicly, but practiced it privately. Records blamed deaths on illness or fever. Rumors told the real story, prisoners vanishing, confessions made under unspeakable conditions, screams beneath royal residences. This ambiguity was intentional. Foreign dignitaries saw law and order, domestic enemies saw shadows, and never knew if they'd vanish into them. The fear was often enough. Stories of twisted devices, invisible chambers, and prisoners reappearing broken created a climate of silence. Even families of the disappeared were left in limbo, unsure if their loved ones were dead, imprisoned, or turned. The architecture itself fed the fear. False walls, disorienting acoustics, guard rotations designed to fragment knowledge. Torture became psychological, manipulating space, time, and perception. But psychological warfare was only the beginning. Before we uncover the most disturbing truths, who went into these chambers and why so few came out, take a moment to subscribe. We expose the parts of history power tried to bury, and what comes next was meant to stay buried. The victims of England's secret torture chambers tell a story that reveals the true nature of medieval power and the lengths to which rulers would go to eliminate threats both real and imagined. These weren't just common criminals or foreign enemies. They were people whose knowledge, influence, or simple existence posed challenges to royal authority. Religious dissidents formed the largest category of victims, particularly during periods of doctrinal change, when entire populations found themselves on the wrong side of official theology. During Henry VIII's break with Rome, Catholic priests who refused to acknowledge royal supremacy over the Church faced interrogation techniques designed to extract not just confessions, but detailed information about underground Catholic networks throughout England. Edmund Campion, a Jesuit missionary captured in 1581, provides one of the few first-hand accounts of these interrogations. His description of the rack reveals techniques that went far beyond simple stretching. Interrogators had developed methods for applying pressure gradually over days or weeks, allowing victims to heal partially between sessions, while maintaining constant psychological pressure. Campion wrote that, "The pain was such that I could not think of anything else, yet my mind remained clear enough to understand that this was only the beginning." Political dissidents faced treatment that reflected their particular threats to royal authority. Writers and printers who published unauthorized critiques of government policy were subjected to interrogations designed to reveal their sources, distributors, and financial backers. The goal wasn't just to punish individual dissidents, but to map and destroy entire networks of opposition before they could threaten royal power. Women accused of witchcraft or adultery faced interrogations that combined religious persecution with sexual violence in ways that revealed medieval England's deep anxieties about female autonomy. The techniques used against these victims were designed to extract confessions that would justify their execution, while serving as warnings to other women who might challenge traditional gender roles. Perhaps most disturbing were the cases involving children, sons and daughters of political enemies who were held as leverage against their parents. These young victims weren't necessarily tortured themselves, but were confined in conditions designed to break their parents' resistance through emotional manipulation. Some spent years in chambers designed to stunt their physical and psychological development, emerging as adults who bore the scars of childhood trauma that served as permanent warnings about the consequences of opposing royal authority. Construction workers renovating the White Tower's foundation break through what appears to be original Norman stonework. Behind the wall, a chamber sealed for over 400 years, 12 feet by 8 feet, ceiling too low to stand. But the dimensions weren't what made hardened construction workers refuse to continue working. They found names carved into stone, dates that contradicted every official record, and one final message scratched deep into the wall. John Thornby, taken in the year of our Lord 1483, here 3 years come Michaelmas, pray for my soul in the chamber below. Ground-penetrating radar revealed void spaces beneath the discovered room, an underground complex far more extensive than anyone had imagined. But when investigators tried to explore further, government authorities stepped in. The findings were classified under official secrets legislation that remains in effect today. Why? Because the chamber had been deliberately sealed, not just to hide its existence, but to eliminate any trace of what had occurred there. Evidence suggested that victims had been entombed alive when the wall was constructed in the 16th century, a mass grave that doubled as evidence disposal. The 1964 discovery remains classified, but leaked documents suggest similar chambers have been found beneath other royal properties throughout England. And yet, we now know it wasn't the only one. The government's continued secrecy raises one terrifying question. What other aspects of medieval English history remain hidden in underground chambers that official tours will never visit? The inscriptions carved into hidden walls tell us everything we need to know about power operating in darkness. Names that official records never acknowledged. Dates that contradict everything we've been taught. Messages from people who knew they would never be found. Do you believe we've truly evolved? Or have we just hidden the chambers better? Which part of this shocked you the most? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're fascinated by the hidden mechanisms that really shaped history, make sure to subscribe. Next week, we're investigating the secret execution methods of Imperial Russia, where the Tsars developed techniques that made even these English chambers seem primitive by comparison. The methods we'll uncover reveal why some secrets were buried in the Russian snow, for very good reasons.